Some things I want you to be aware of. We're getting a red bar to start the week off here with the S&P 500. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean a top. Again, often you could top with the red. Sometimes you see a peak like with the first, second, or third red bar. Again, over here we had multiple points of divergence going into the 2022 high over here. And again, we very well could see the same thing here with the completion of the multiple point divergences here, running the major trend lines of resistance in the weekly and the monthly time frame. And again, the divergence on the MACD, divergence in the more recent price action on the stochastic. So what I'll be watching is, do we reach the objective target on the S&P 500, the weekly and the daily time frame, or do we fall short of it? My guess is we'll reach it, but again, wrong about that. It could be close, but no cigar. Again, we've got a red bar. Will we end the week that way? You get 1 bar per week. Moving into the holidays, where we're going to get lighter volume and the market can easily be manipulated up or down. So I'll be watching to see if we reach the target. I'll be watching to see if we hold above the 10-week moving average here going forward. Remember, in January, when we fall below it, that could start the reversals when we lose that 10-week moving average. I've talked to you about this over and over again, that we've got the red bars. We're going sideways. We haven't even seen a reversal of conditions here on the S&P daily. I told you, I thought Friday that we bottomed out and we're forming a triangle. Now, if I'm wrong, we get a break and probably move down the rising trend line that you'll see in this video. I think you're going to see green bars here. Okay, I think you're going to see. Now, maybe the red bars aren't done and we end up going lower. And I'm wrong about the triangle getting an immediate upward resolution. But I keep saying over and over again, I think you're going to end up forming this divergence in the most recent price action here in December or on into January. I think you're going to see my objective target reached in the weekly time frame in all likelihood. If I start seeing evidence of a reversal, I'll let you know. Again, I continue to remain bullish. My signals continue to remain bullish. Need a bounce off the 50-period moving average, the S&P 500, and here before the election, and then the 20-period right here, as we talked about bounces likely going to happen off of those moving averages. I think the Dow and the Russell are suggesting we had that divergence on the RSI on the Dow, not seen here, but we're now becoming oversold. We've had this losing streak. We have had the reversal of conditions. We have corrected on the Dow and the Russell as Nasdaq's making new highs, as the S&P 500 has been correcting sideways. I think the Dow and the Russell are suggesting we're going to get a rebound, maybe here with the Fed or on into the holidays. Also starting the week off with a red awesome oscillator bar. Okay, for the Russell's corrected, got the reversal of conditions, a red bars, a red cloud, awesome oscillator again turning down. I think it's going to turn back up. We'll see if the Dow and the Russell make lower highs or higher highs if we can rally, but they have both become oversold. S&P is corrected sideways, forming a triangle. We're going to see an upward resolution of the triangle on the S&P to new all-time highs, reach the target level, and then we'll see what happens. Oftentimes the Russell will diverge with the S&P. The Russell peaked back over here in late November. I think it was the 25th. We just recently saw some new highs not too long ago on the S&P 500 here in December. Though Nvidia was down today, key support, we're still seeing strength here on the Nasdaq. And our doji is a continuation. My signals continue to remain bullish, but we'll be watching. This is the daily chart of the Nasdaq. We continue to have the bullish reversal of conditions. No red awesome oscillator bar in the weekly time frame here, but again, a divergence is developing on the awesome oscillator. A divergence is developing on the MACD. Signals remain bullish for the Nasdaq. Signals are showing that the S&P is going sideways in the triangle that I talked about over the weekend. I told you, I think we're going to see an upward resolution of that triangle. Here, we're going flatline, representing a sideways move with our triangle. S&P in the daily got a 13 fall by 9. We hit the trend line from the July peak, but I told you again, still think we're going to go up and hit this other trend line, clearing this one right here, and the triangle very well could get us over that trend line. The 13.9 very well could just be a sideways correction. We could get an overthrow to that level and not form a new reversal signal. Just overthrow this level a little bit and have that act as a reversal after overthrowing it. So it can play out either way, or we can form a brand new signal. But like I said, I think we're headed to this upper boundary of the rising wedge will clear the July trend line. I remain bullish. Continue to believe the S&P is going to make more new all-time highs. In the triangle, intraday signals back to bullish here, again, could form a larger divergence to reach the upper boundary of the rising wedge. Again, momentum briefly turned bearish, going sideways with our triangle. The trend's still bullish here intraday, but again, I think we're going to see an upward resolution in all likelihood of that triangle. See more of it in this video. Now, while the S&P does not have a bearish reversal of conditions with the cloud that I talked about earlier, we do have the momentum line bearish here, and we got some signals of a top here in recent price action. We're correcting sideways in the form of a triangle. We had the divergence right here with momentum give us that sideways price action. Very similar to some of the previous triangles I talked about. Now, again, if we firm up, we can form a larger divergence right here. Things like momentum here, the MACD, the RSI, and other indicators. I'm wrong about the upward resolution for the triangle. We break down, the momentum will remain bearish here. But the momentum line remains bullish for the Nasdaq. The blue line you see right there, trend signals remain bullish. Momentum remains bullish. It could be forming a divergence right now, approaching that trend line in the weekly time frame. Watch the video all the way through and you'll see it. The Russell and the Dow can attempt to rebound as we have these nice divergences on the RSI. Then again, we might see an upward resolution of that triangle on the S&P. It's corrected sideways where we've had this pullback with the Russell and the Dow. Time Nasdaq's gone higher. But Nvidia is not helping the Nasdaq right now, which they're diverging. Huge red flag. Same thing with the Dow. It has had this losing streak below the 10 and 20, and again, the diversions played out. Again, could go a little bit lower. It's approaching the trend line right here from these lows. Also, longer term in the weekly time frame, a longer term trend line, just a little bit higher than this trend line right here. Rising wedge. Let me just show you real fast. Now again, rather than connecting the low here and the low here for the channel in the daily time frame, again, I'm taking it all the way back here, and you've got a potential rising wedge there here in the weekly time frame, these divergences. So again, got to be watching this, and we have that divergence between the Dow and the transfers. I've talked about that last week. Start the week off with the Dow, and again, you get 1 bar per week. We start the week off with the Dow starting to roll over here on the MACD. We'll see if we end the week that way. Do we get a rally back up with the Fed and on into the holidays here, or we peak in December? Or am I wrong about my target level? It's close but no cigar, but we don't end up reaching that level. Again, I think we will. Also tell you what will happen, what could happen if I'm wrong about my objective target level. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really appreciate it. I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. Turn all the offers down for sponsors because I don't want to sell you anything. Ask that you do what you can to help out. So please consider partnering with me today. We had the VIX pop up. We gapped higher. Again, at this bullish divergence, we're watching this closely on the VIX. The VIX could still continue to consolidate. It's got to get back above the 50-period moving average for volatility to return on the S&P 500. We're still below that 50-period moving average, but the 50 is still above the 200, warning that we're at risk. Topping process. And again, we could see a peak in the not too distant future. But volatility is rising up here. So again, we'll see if our triangle in the S&P can have the upward resolution. If we end up getting a breakdown triangle, again, triangles can break in either direction. My guess is it will break upward, but we'll see what happens. We're going sideways on the S&P 500. The Sunday video that I just made over the weekend, I made 2 videos, one on Friday and then I posted another one on Sunday. The Sunday video, if you did not watch it, you need to go watch it. I talked about the yield curve, but I talked about what happened in the past when we've seen this signal happen and why I told you that we were likely just months away from the recession. And before the recession hits, the stock market will peak and begin to price it in. I go through the past and show you what happened. The first 10 minutes of the video, I cover the Nasdaq, but then I get into that, and again, it's the majority of the video. You need to watch that video. Understand what I'm talking about. I continue to warn. I believe we're going to new all-time highs. I believe that the S&P in a sideways triangle that's about to us to new all-time highs towards this trend line right here in the weekly time frame. But I talked about the uninverting of the yield curve. So go watch that video. I'll link it at the end of this video. Take the time to watch that video if you did not get a chance to do so. Again, I continue to remain bullish. I believe we're going to new all-time highs. I believe we're going up to the trend line in the weekly time frame and the trend line in the daily time frame. The Dow was down 110 points, down 0.25%. The S&P was up almost 23 points, up 0.38%. The Nasdaq was up 1.25%. The Russell was up 0.64%. The VIX was up 6.37%. We've got options expiration this week. Future contracts are rolling over this week. At the Fed this week. Tomorrow morning we have retail sales. Wednesday we have the FOMC meeting. We have Powell's press conference during the market session. We have the GDP revision on Thursday. Friday we get the PCE inflation data and personal income and personal spending. If the triangle, take the S&P 500 to new highs, again, moving into the holidays with lighter volume, again, continue to believe we're going towards that high 6,100 area, the trend line. Take our time reaching it. Again, it might go on into the 6,200 range. Line is the target. Continuing to watch Nvidia, we've got the head and shoulders right here. We're trying to bounce off horizontal support. Again, ahead of earnings to be watching this trend line. Major trend line of resistance. We turned right off of it. And that was the same trend line longer term in the weekly time frame. We sold off 14%. I predicted we would do that off of the trend line, but then I predicted we would bounce right here off of these this intersection of support, horizontal support, and the rising trend line to form a right shoulder we have. I believe Nvidia's topped. I don't think it's going to make new highs. I told you if I'm wrong, though, we can go up and hit the trend line again, which would be in the weekly time frame in here, which would then likely be a larger 3 drives to a high. But again, I still think Nvidia has likely topped. Diverging with Nasdaq. Again, Nvidia sold off today, and yet Nasdaq had a big rally. Remember, MicroStrategy now been added to Nasdaq. Boy, that's going to create a lot of volatility when we get the Bitcoin sell-off. Boy, stock price is heavily influenced by the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin reversal, and I still think Bitcoin's going higher. If you want to see my latest Bitcoin video, I'll link it at the end of this video. Bitcoin's likely going to the 115,000 resistance area towards the trend line, just like the S&P. Very, very similar situation. You might want to check that out. Similar to what I'm looking for on the S&P 500. Nvidia right now, as we start the week off, it's right at this trend line and just above that 20-week moving average, the blue line right there. And again, if we go back up, then, and I'm wrong about the lower highs, we'll slam into this trend line right here again. Made that a little thick there. We'll slam into that trend line again right there. And we'll hit the trend line in the weekly time frame. Not this one up here of the more recent channel, but the longer term channel, as I've talked about. If we break this trend line here this week, which we're testing it right now, then validate a reversal off this trend line and the longer term trend line on Nvidia's weekly chart. And these divergences would play out. I'm looking to watch to see if the RSI starts dropping below 50 here and we start taking out the 20-week moving average. You'll have a 2050 sell signal. And if divergences begin to play out here in the weekly time frame. Again, the channel we just looked at up close is this channel right here. If we break it, we will confirm a reversal off this larger channel in the weekly time frame. I think that will terminate the bull market for Nvidia. I think it will terminate the bull market for the AI rally. I think it will end up terminating the bull market for the S&P and Nasdaq. As I've said, I think S&P is still going to go higher. All-time highs, complete the blow off top, complete a top, start a reversal, and then we'll usher in the bear market. I don't think it's done yet. I think we could get there in December or January. Just reached the very last day of November, my target in the monthly time frame. We haven't reached my target in the weekly time frame, which I told you I thought we'd overthrow the monthly trend line. That we'd overthrow this monthly trend line, which we're now doing. And that was at the mid 6,000 area. I told you I thought we'd move into the mid to high 6,100 area. But I told you the on the weekly time frame was likely to be reached. Now, the longer we take to reach it, the higher the target goes. This target, we hit it just over 2 weeks ago. But I told you, again, I thought we would overthrow it. You could see a peak in December here or on into January. At the 2022 peak, it was the first week of January. Could be a delay due to taxes. Big money waiting to sell until after the new year hits. So again, we've reached the target 2 weeks ago. Now we have to reach that weekly target. If we do that in December, then you got a shot at a peak in December. It happened in December. In 2018, we had a peak in December. Fall back 20% sell-off in December. Going into lighter trading volume, you got the Fed this week, and we still haven't reached my target in the weekly time frame. I think that we're going to overthrow it more here. I do think we're going to higher. I remain bullish. But believing that a top is about to form. But I keep saying over and over in every single video, new all-time highs because of this trend line and the trend line in the weekly time frame. I think we're finishing a blow-off top. Usually how market tops finish. In 2000, it did in 1929. We're going to get it again here, whether that's 2024 or January. But I think you've got a very good shot that you're going to see the recession show up first or second quarters. I talked about my last update, and I think you got a good shot it's going to show up in the first quarter. Rule was triggered 5 months ago. January 6 months. April is 9 months. Watch my last video. Go watch it. An A in the class. Go watch my last video. You get that uninverting of the yield curve between the 10 and the 3 month. Within a couple months, you see it can show up. 5.5 or 6 months that the recession showed up there in 2007. About 2 months after the uninverting of the yield curve there in 2001, the stock market had already long ago peaked. Watch the video. I talk about it all. I'll link it at the end of this video. Most important video to be paying attention to, because I'm talking about the recession indicators, and I'll be talking more about other recession indicators. There's a lot of them pointing to a recession that's about to start. Again, overthrowing this level as I've been predicting again to that weekly trend line. Listen to me. I think you're getting a major top forming in this area. Take us eventually back to the midpoint here, test the pandemic low. Probably take that out, and it could go as down as the 1575 area, 1550, which 1550 was this peak, 1575 was this peak of, again, horizontal support, which was a resistance at the 2000 and 2007 top. Overthrowing the trend line here, but I think we'll even go higher because I think we're going to reach this trend line, as I've been saying, the blue trend line right here. The upper boundary parallel to the lower boundary here. We've got these really nice looking divergences on the RSI and the MACD. And again, because the market takes its time doing what it's going to do, then people get good and complacent. And then when it happens, they're shocked. When it happens, it's going to be very, very violent. And you're going to see about a 20% drop very, very quickly, probably around 6 to 8 weeks. See a 20% drop real fast. Usher in the bear market. Again, I believe we're going to do all-time highs. I believe we're consolidating sideways, and in a triangle on the 60-minute chart, we're going to go higher. Here it is up close. And again, you can see from that presidential election rally, we had that bullish divergence ahead. You can see it real good here up close. And then, again, we call for that pullback here. Pull back right at a support, and then we've had this rally, and we formed the bearish divergence up here with the rising wedge, and then we corrected sideways. I told you over the weekend in my first update that I believe that we've got a triangle here and that we're bottoming, and that, again, we're going to have an upward resolution. Okay, now, again, triangles can be continuation of reversal. Again, I thought this one would break, and we get this rally right here, back over here, and we broke down first, and then we got it. But my objective targets are going to be reached. I think this triangle is probably going to get an upward resolution surrounding the Fed. On into the holidays here, watching, can we reach the trend line in the weekly time frame here in December, or does it drag out into January. I also told you if I'm wrong about the triangle, we could go down and test the 200. But again, I have the guts to tell you what I think. And I think the triangle, and we did get gap higher and get the rally today, but I think this triangle is going to see an upward resolution. We came up to the upper boundary. I did today. Let me fix my trend line here. The charting program is really great. I really like these charts, but sometimes when I hit save, the trend line moves on me. But anyways, here again, I think we're going to see an upward resolution of the triangle in all likelihood, but the triangle may not be done. We went up to the upper boundary here and stalled. So I told you again, we were turning off of, and I talked about this back up here at the peak, that we were turning off this trend line from the July peak right here. And again, we turned right off of it, but now we're correcting in a sideways move in the form of a triangle. And again, we're surrounding our 10-period moving average, holding above the 20, and this horizontal support level right here from the peak here and the peak over here that we broke above. Just this triangle, it acted as support of this horizontal support level, and the peak right there was support right there. So again, some interesting support levels with these triangles that have formed. Told you again, I thought we'd get an upward resolution, move above the red line, and move towards this upper boundary of the rising wedge. If you do that, you're going to reach that level in the weekly time frame. We do that in December here, I think you could. We'll see if a divergence develops here, or do we start making new extremes. We'll see how it unfolds. I think the MACD can form another divergence right here. We had one develop that has given us this sideways corrective move. Zoom out on the 60-minute chart here, you can see the triangle, and again, this upper boundary, if we can clear that trend line from the July peak over here, I think that we could reach this area and again, rally with the Fed or on into the holidays. Again, I'm looking for a peak in December or January. Now that we've reached the objective target in the monthly time frame, I think we'll overthrow that level, go to the weekly chart, trend line, objective target there, and the trend line here in the 60-minute time frame and the daily time frame of the rising wedge. Nasdaq's already overthrowing this level. I think S&P will climb above that red trend line here from the July peak, and I think we'll move to the upper boundary here, get above the upper Bollinger Band in all likelihood, and I think we'll form a divergence right here. The momentum moved to a new high right here, so I think you're going to get a divergence much like what you had back over here, or like what you had over here, where prices really, in both of those cases, went sideways and then popped higher, went sideways and popped higher in both of those cases. And that's what we have here. I think we're going sideways and we'll pop higher. And I think we're going to come right into this trend line. Whether that is in December or January, it depends on how long we take to reach it here. We'll complete a divergence. Wrong about the triangle getting an immediate upward resolution. We could still come down to the triangle, as I mentioned over the weekend, we could still come down to the trend line or the 20 period and then come back up. And that's what we did over here. Over here with this triangle right here ahead of the presidential election. We went back and tested the 50. We could come back here and test the trend line. Wrong about an immediate upward resolution, but again, I have the guts to tell you what I think. And if I'm wrong, then be watching the trend line in the 20 period and the 50s below that. I think you're going to get an upward resolution. Now, Nasdaq overthrown the upper boundary of the rising wedge, went up and moving towards the weekly trend line. Now listen carefully. Nasdaq may end up diverging with the S&P at the top. Nasdaq's moving to new highs. The S&P is not. We got that inside day last Thursday. I told you an inside day could be bearish, but it has to be confirmed to get a fall through. It did not. I told you we got a doji the very next day. I told you to be watching to see what happened today. We saw the doji be a continuation, not a reversal pattern. I told you it could be either one. But the upper boundary in the weekly time frame, we're already above the upper boundary here, overthrowing it. Rising wedges often do that. Could be evolving into a channel. Doji was a continuation, and now again we'll be watching this upper Bollinger Band closely as we're closing above that. We could complete a divergence here with the RSI that could take us down and still merge with the S&P 500, or this may just reach a new extreme on the RSI. Often that is the case. When we had the low back over in August, we reached a new extreme. There was no bullish divergence present. We got the MACD moving to new highs. No divergence present. So again, we'll be watching some of the trend lines there in the weekly and the monthly time frame. Signals remain bullish as we're forming the negative divergence, multiple point of negative divergence in the 60-minute time frame. We had the Nasdaq rise by 1.45% today. It was up 316 points, gapping higher, another gap higher. Again, I'll be watching what becomes of the divergence here. Now, again, I told you we can build upon this divergence and start to turn, or we can start forming brand new, fresh divergences to new extremes here, towards these extremes that were previously reached. Now coming that trend line in the weekly time frame I talked about. And again, oftentimes, like at the July peak, Nasdaq and S&P diverge from one another, so do keep that in mind. Nasdaq may peak before the S&P 500. Remember, Nasdaq's making new highs right now. The S&P is not quite there yet, although I think it's going to be. But we'll be watching this divergence right here. And I'm looking at this trend line right here in the linear time frame, the linear scaling in the weekly time frame, pardon me. The trend line here connecting these levels. This could be an area of interest. If we exclude the shadows right here and the closes there and just connect this point and this point, you got a really nice looking parallel channel connecting this point and this point from here to here on the peak to up here. That's directly overhead. Nice looking divergence on the MACD, RSI. So just another trend line that I've been paying attention to. Here's the channel in this larger channel. Now we have overthrown the upper boundary of this channel going back to the peak there in November and the pandemic low back over here in 2020. Some things to be paying attention to on the Nasdaq. Remember, it was this trend line right here, the trend line right here, the upper boundary here, and this trend line is why I believe that we had a peak there in July. I was right about the peak, but I told you if I was wrong that that's not the top, we can go up to this trend line again, or try to reach the one in the monthly time frame, including the shadow, which we're now doing that in the monthly time frame. So just some areas to be aware of here in the weekly time frame.